My name is Dan Parker, and I can reboot a server faster than most people can tie their shoes, but apparently that doesn't make me husband material. At least not according to my wife Julia, who reminds me daily that I'm about as useful around the house as a chocolate teapot. Dan, the garbage disposal is making that noise again, Julia called from the kitchen this morning, her voice carrying that special tone reserved for discussing my many inadequacies. You know, that grinding sound like it's dying a slow, painful death. I looked up from my laptop where I was troubleshooting network issues for Rossner Tech Solutions, my bread-and-butter IT support job that keeps us in our modest 3-bedroom ranch in Clearwater, Florida. The house sits in one of those middle-class neighborhoods where everyone knows everyone else's business, and the gossip flows faster than hurricane storm surge. "I'll take a look at it this weekend," I said, knowing full well that taking a look would involve me staring at the disposal like it might suddenly explain its problems in plain English. "That's what you said last weekend, and the weekend before that." Julia appeared in the doorway of my home office, all 5'6" of her radiating the kind of frustrated energy that makes smart men run for cover. At 37, she still turned heads with her auburn hair and green eyes, especially when she was showing houses to potential buyers in her real estate agent blazers. Maybe I should just call someone who actually knows what they're doing. There it was, the not-so-subtle dig that had become as regular as morning coffee in the Parker household. I'm Dan Parker, 40 years old, ex-Army communications specialist turned IT support guy, and according to my wife, I couldn't fix a leaky faucet if my life depended on it. Which, considering the state of our marriage, it just might. "Sure, call someone," I said, turning back to my screen. "Just remember that someone charges $80 an hour to tell you the same thing I would tell you for free. It's probably just something stuck in the blades." Julia's laugh had all the warmth of a January morning in Minnesota. "Right, because your free advice has been so helpful with the dishwasher that's been broken for 3 months, the ceiling fan that wobbles like it's about to take flight, and the bathroom door that sticks every single time." She wasn't wrong, and that was the hell of it. I could diagnose network problems that stumped engineers with decades of experience, but ask me to replace a toilet flapper, and I might as well be trying to perform brain surgery with a butter knife. My phone buzzed with a text from Elle Martinez, our next-door neighbor. Elle was 38, recently divorced, and had the kind of sharp wit that could cut glass. She'd moved in 6 months ago after her marriage imploded, and we'd struck up an easy friendship based on mutual appreciation for sarcasm and good coffee. "Your wife's got the handyman over again," the text read. "Third time this week. Either your house is falling apart faster than a house of cards in a hurricane, or something else is getting fixed." I glanced out my office window toward the driveway, and sure enough, there was the familiar sight of a navy blue Ford F-150 with Bell's Home Repair painted on the side in bold white letters. Marcus Bell, 34 years old, 6'2", built like he bench-pressed refrigerators for fun, and apparently the answer to all of Julia's home maintenance prayers. Marcus had first shown up 2 months ago when Julia decided our kitchen faucet needed replacing. I'd suggested we could probably handle it ourselves with a YouTube tutorial and a trip to Home Depot, but Julia had insisted we needed a professional. Marcus had replaced that faucet in about 20 minutes, charged us $150, and somehow managed to make Julia laugh more in those 20 minutes than I had in the previous 6 months. Since then, he'd become a regular fixture around the Parker house. Squeaky hinges, running toilet, loose deck railing. Marcus Bell was apparently the Swiss Army knife of home repair, and Julia was his biggest fan. "He's so competent," she'd gushed after he fixed our garbage disposal the first time. "It's refreshing to have a man around who actually knows how to use tools." I'd bitten back the obvious response that I knew how to use plenty of tools. They just happened to be keyboards, routers, and diagnostic software instead of hammers and wrenches. In today's world, my skills paid the bills and kept the lights on, but they didn't earn me any respect points in my own home. Through my office window, I watched Marcus climb out of his truck, toolbox in hand, that easy, confident stride that screamed, "I can fix anything." He was wearing jeans and a tight-fitting t-shirt that showed off arms that had clearly never spent their days hunched over a computer screen. His dark skin gleamed with a light sheen of sweat from the Florida humidity, and when he smiled and waved at Julia as she opened the front door, I felt something twist in my stomach that had nothing to do with my morning coffee. "Marcus, thank goodness you could come by so quickly." Julia's voice carried through the open windows, bright and cheerful in a way it hadn't been when she was talking to me 5 minutes earlier. "No problem, Mrs. Parker. What seems to be the issue today?" Mrs. Parker. Right, because that wasn't loaded with implications. I tried to focus on the network diagnostic I was running for Rossner's biggest client, but concentration was hard to come by when I could hear Julia's laughter drifting through the house. She was giving Marcus the grand tour of our latest household crisis. Apparently, the bathroom door in the master suite was sticking again. My phone buzzed with another text from Elle. "They're heading upstairs. Should I start a timer?" Elle had a front row seat to the Marcus Bell show from her kitchen window, and she'd become my unofficial intelligence source on the goings-on in my own home. It was pathetic, but it was also the only way I knew what was happening when I was locked away in my office, trying to make enough money to pay for all these repairs. 20 minutes later, I heard the unmistakable sound of the bathroom door opening and closing smoothly, followed by Julia's delighted exclamation of, "Oh, Marcus, you're amazing! It's like it was never broken at all." "Just needed a little adjustment to the hinges and some lubrication," Marcus replied, and I swear I could hear the grin in his voice. Sometimes the old hardware just needs the right touch. I closed my laptop harder than necessary and decided I needed some air. And maybe a beer, possibly several beers. The local dive bar, Murphy's Tavern, was exactly the kind of place where a man could drink away his troubles without anyone asking uncomfortable questions. The bartender, Tommy, had seen enough broken marriages to know when to pour drinks and when to keep his mouth shut. "Rough day?" Tommy asked, sliding a cold Budweiser across the scarred wooden bar. "Wife's got the handyman over again," I said, taking a long pull from the bottle. "Third time this week." Tommy nodded knowingly. "Marcus Bell? You know him?" Everyone knows Marcus. Good with his hands, popular with the ladies, especially the married ones whose husbands work too much. The beer suddenly tasted bitter. "What's that supposed to mean?" Tommy shrugged, wiping down glasses with practiced efficiency. "Just saying, man. Maybe you should pay more attention to what's getting fixed around your house." I finished my beer in silence, paid my tab, and drove home through the humid Florida evening. The sun was setting over the Gulf, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that would have been beautiful if I'd been in the mood to appreciate beauty. Instead, I was thinking about Marcus Bell's confident smile and the way Julia's voice had sounded when she called him amazing. The blue F-150 was gone from my driveway, but I could see lights on in Elle's kitchen. On impulse, I walked over and knocked on her back door. "Well, well," Elle said, opening the door with a knowing smile. "If it isn't the neighborhood's most oblivious husband. Come in. I was just opening a bottle of wine." Elle's kitchen was the mirror image of ours, but where Julia favored country chic with roosters and gingham, Elle had gone for clean lines and modern fixtures. She poured 2 glasses of red wine and gestured for me to sit at her breakfast bar. "So," she said, settling onto the stool across from me, "how long are you going to pretend you don't know what's really going on?" "I don't know what you mean." Ella raised an eyebrow. "Dan, honey, I like you, but you're not stupid. Marcus Bell has been at your house 3 times this week, always when you're locked away in your office, and your wife giggles like a teenager every time he shows up. Either your house is falling apart faster than a condemned building, or something else entirely is getting serviced." The wine was good, but it couldn't wash away the taste of humiliation. "You think Julia's having an affair?" "I think Julia's a woman who feels neglected by her husband, And Marcus Bell is the kind of man who knows exactly how to make a woman feel appreciated. Whether that's crossed any lines yet, I couldn't say, but it's heading that direction faster than a freight train. I stared into my wine glass, watching the red liquid swirl. What am I supposed to do? I can't suddenly become Mr. Fix-It overnight. You could start by paying attention to your wife instead of your computer screen. And maybe, just maybe, you could figure out what Marcus Bell is really fixing around your house. Ella's words followed me home, echoing in my head as I walked through my front door to find Julia curled up on the couch watching some reality TV show about housewives behaving badly. "How was your day?" I asked, settling into my recliner. "Fine," she said without looking away from the television. "Marcus fixed the bathroom door, and he looked at the ceiling fan in the bedroom. Said it needs a new mounting bracket. More work for Marcus then." Now she did look at me, and there was something in her green eyes I couldn't quite read. "Well, at least someone around here is capable of fixing things." That night, lying in bed next to my wife, listening to her breathe in the darkness, I made a decision. If Marcus Bell was fixing more than just household repairs, I was going to find out exactly what was broken in my marriage. And then I was going to figure out how to fix it. Or break it completely. The next morning, Julia announced she was showing houses all day and wouldn't be home until evening. She kissed my cheek with the kind of perfunctory affection usually reserved for elderly relatives, grabbed her real estate portfolio, and headed out in her white Honda Accord, leaving a cloud of expensive perfume and unspoken tension in her wake. I waited exactly 10 minutes before texting Elle. "Coast is clear. Coffee?" Her response was immediate. "Already brewing. Back doors open." Elle's kitchen smelled like French roast and conspiracy. She had her laptop open on the breakfast bar, and I could see she'd been busy. "Okay, Detective Parker," she said, sliding a steaming mug across to me. "I've been doing some reconnaissance work since our conversation last night. You might want to sit down for this." I was already sitting, but I gripped my coffee mug a little tighter. "What did you find?" Elle turned her laptop screen toward me. "First, let's talk about Marcus Bell's business model. I did some digging online, checked out his website, looked at reviews. He's got a solid reputation, fair prices, good work, nothing suspicious there. But I also checked his social media accounts, Instagram, Facebook, the works. And Marcus Bell has a very interesting definition of customer service." She clicked through a series of photos on his Instagram account. Marcus at job sites, Marcus with his tools, Marcus posing with satisfied customers. And a lot of those satisfied customers were women. Attractive women. Married women, based on the wedding rings visible in several photos. "Look at the comments," Ella said, pointing to the screen. I read through them, my stomach sinking with each post. "Thanks for the amazing service, Marcus," from a woman named Jennifer. "You're the best handyman in town," from someone called Lisa. "Can't wait to have you back to finish the job," from a user named Stephanie. "Could be innocent," I said, but my voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. "Could be," Ella agreed. "But look at this." She pulled up Facebook and showed me Marcus's profile. More photos, more female admirers, and more comments that walked the line between professional appreciation and something else entirely. "Here's what really caught my attention," Elle said, clicking on a photo from 3 weeks ago. It showed Marcus at a backyard barbecue, beer in hand, arm around a blonde woman I didn't recognize. The caption read, "Great day working and playing in Clearwater. So he goes to parties, big deal. Dan, look at the location tag." I squinted at the screen. The photo was tagged at an address I recognized. It was 3 streets over from our house, in our neighborhood. "He's not just working in the area," Ella said quietly. "He's socializing here, building relationships, getting invited to parties." My coffee had gone cold, but I kept sipping it anyway, needing something to do with my hands. "You think he's running some kind of scam?" I think he's a smart businessman who understands that the best way to build a client base is to become part of the community. The question is, how far is he willing to go to secure that client base? Elle closed her laptop and leaned back against the kitchen counter. I've got a proposal for you, Dan, but you're not going to like it. I'm listening. I think we should document what's happening at your house when you're not paying attention. Photos, timestamps, duration of visits. If Julia's just hiring Marcus for legitimate repairs, then we'll have proof of that. If something else is going on, you want to spy on my wife. I want to help you figure out what's really happening in your marriage before you make any decisions you can't take back. I stared out Elle's kitchen window at my house, where Marcus's truck was once again parked in the driveway. When had he arrived? How had I missed it? He's there now, I said. Elle followed my gaze and nodded. Showed up about 20 minutes after Julia left. Interesting timing. Maybe she called him before she left, told him it was safe to come over. Maybe. We watched through the window as Marcus emerged from his truck, but instead of heading for the front door with his toolbox, he walked around to the back of the house, to the pool area, where he'd have privacy from the street. That's new, Ella murmured. My phone buzzed with a text from Julia. Forgot to mention, asked Marcus to look at the pool filter while I'm out. Don't let him track mud through the house. Convenient, Elle said, reading over my shoulder. She remembered to text you about the pool filter, but forgot to mention she'd scheduled him to come over. I stood up abruptly, the stool scraping against Elle's tile floor. I need to see what he's doing back there. Dan, wait. Elle caught my arm. If you go storming over there now, what exactly are you going to accomplish? If he's legitimately working on your pool filter, you'll look like a paranoid husband. If he's not, then I need to know. Then let's be smart about this. My bedroom window has a perfect view of your backyard. We can see what he's actually doing without him knowing we're watching. Ella's bedroom was decorated in the same clean, modern style as her kitchen, all whites and grays with touches of blue that reminded me of the Gulf Coast. But I wasn't paying attention to the decor. I was focused on the window that looked directly into my backyard. Marcus was indeed working on the pool filter, or at least he appeared to be. He had the housing open and was examining the cartridge with what looked like professional attention. But he was also shirtless, his t-shirt draped over one of our patio chairs, and he kept glancing toward the house like he was expecting someone. He's actually working, I said, feeling a mixture of relief and disappointment. For now, Ella replied. But Dan, look at how he's positioned himself. He's got a clear view of both your back door and my house. He knows exactly where he can be seen from and where he can't. As if to prove her point, Marcus moved to the far side of the pool, the area that would be hidden from most of the neighboring houses. He pulled out his phone and made a call, talking animatedly to whoever was on the other end. Can you read lips? I asked. Not well enough to make out what he's saying. But his body language is interesting. That's not a business call. Marcus finished his call, put his phone away, and returned to the pool filter. But now he was working faster, like he had somewhere else to be. How long has he been here? I asked. Ella checked her phone. About 40 minutes. For a pool filter cleaning, that's either very thorough or very slow. We watched for another 15 minutes as Marcus finished his work, replaced the filter housing, and tested the system. Then he did something that made my blood run cold. He walked over to our back door and tried the handle. It was locked, but the fact that he'd tried it at all sent a chill down my spine. Did you see that? I whispered, as if Marcus might somehow hear me from across the yard. I saw it, Ella confirmed grimly. That's not normal handyman behavior. Marcus walked back to his truck, but instead of leaving immediately, he sat in the driver's seat with the door open, making another phone call. This one was shorter, and when he finished, he was smiling. I need to know who he's calling, I said. Unless you've got access to his phone records, that's going to be difficult. Marcus finally drove away, and I slumped against Elle's bedroom wall, feeling like I'd just watched my marriage crumble in real time. "What do I do now?" I asked. Ella was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at my empty backyard. "Now we start keeping records. Every visit, every call, every interaction. If Julia's having an affair, we'll catch it. If she's not, then at least you'll know your marriage is just broken, not betrayed." That's supposed to make me feel better? It's supposed to help you make informed decisions instead of emotional ones. I walked home through the humid afternoon air, my mind racing with possibilities and implications. The pool filter was indeed clean and running smoothly. Marcus had done the work Julia had asked him to do. But the phone calls, the checking of our back door, the way he'd positioned himself for privacy, none of that felt like standard handyman protocol. The days that followed felt like walking on cracked ice, every step deliberate, every sound amplified. I kept the log going, not obsessively, but methodically, a habit forming around suspicion, the way moss grows on stone. Slow, inevitable, quiet. Day 2. Julia left at 7:45 a.m. for an open house. Marcus's white Ford F-150 pulled up at 9:12. No tools visible in the bed this time. He carried only a small black duffel. Stayed inside the cab for 6 minutes before getting out, glancing around the yard like someone checking for witnesses. Knocked on the front door. No answer, of course. Then walked around to the side gate, tried the latch, locked as always since I'd changed it last month, and returned to the truck. Sat there another 10 minutes scrolling on his phone. Left at 9:38 without ever touching the pool equipment. I added the entry that night while Julia soaked in the tub, humming off key to whatever playlist was leaking through her earbuds. Day 3. Nothing. No Marcus. No unusual calls. Julia came home at the normal time, kissed my cheek absently, asked about my day like it was a script she'd read too many times. We ate takeout Thai on the couch and watched half an episode of some crime drama before she said she was exhausted and went upstairs. I stayed downstairs pretending to work, actually reviewing security cam footage I'd finally installed 2 weeks earlier. Small wireless cams tucked under the eaves, motion-triggered, cloud-stored. The footage from day 2 showed Marcus's face clearly when he looked toward the house. Not frustrated, not confused. Calculating. Day 4 changed everything. Julia had an evening showing scheduled. A big listing, she said, potential all-cash buyer. She left at 5:30 p.m., wearing the navy dress I used to call her closing dress, the one that made her look untouchable. I waited 20 minutes, then drove to the storage unit we rented on the edge of town. Not to hide anything, just to sit somewhere quiet and think. The unit smelled of cardboard and old paint. I sat on an overturned box and opened the log again. At 6:47 p.m., my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the front camera. Marcus's truck. He parked on the street this time, not the driveway. Got out wearing jeans and a black t-shirt, no company polo, no toolbox. Walked straight to the side gate, opened it with a key I knew I hadn't given him. Disappeared around back. I stared at the notification, heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my teeth. The live feed loaded slowly. There he was, on the patio, pulling open the sliding glass door, the one we always kept locked when no one was home. He stepped inside. I didn't call the police, not yet. Instead, I opened the camera app's playback from the interior cam we'd placed in the living room corner, just in case of break-ins. Marcus moved through the house like he belonged there, not rushed, not looking for valuables. He went to the kitchen, opened the fridge, took out a bottle of the IPA I kept for guests, twisted off the cap, and drank straight from it. Then he walked upstairs. The bedroom camera was motion-activated too. It woke when he entered. He didn't touch anything at first, just stood in the doorway, looking at our bed. Then he sat on my side, ran his hand over the comforter like he was testing the temperature of the sheets. Pulled open the nightstand drawer, my side, and took out the small bottle of lubricant we sometimes used. Smiled, closed it again, left the room. He was in the house 11 minutes total, left through the same sliding door, locked it behind him, exited via the gate. Truck pulled away at 7:03. I sat in the storage unit until the automatic lights clicked off, sat in the dark until my breathing steadied. Then I drove home. Julia arrived at 9:15, smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't hers and carrying Chinese takeout as an apology for running late. She chattered about the showing, great feedback, possible second visit next week, while she reheated lo mein. I nodded, said the right things, asked if she'd seen Marcus today. She froze for half a second. No. Why? Just wondering if the pool's clear yet. It's fine, she said too quickly. He texted earlier this week, said it's good for the season. I smiled. Good to know. That night she fell asleep fast, curled away from me. I lay awake listening to her breathe, thinking about the hand that had touched our sheets, about the key he shouldn't have, about how many times this had happened when I was at work or out running errands or just not paying attention. The next morning I called a locksmith before Julia woke up. New locks on every exterior door, rekeyed the gate, added a deadbolt to the sliding glass. When the guy finished, I tipped him extra and asked him to cut 2 sets. One for me, one I'd keep in my safe deposit box. Julia noticed the new keys on the counter when she came down. What's this? Upgraded security, I said. There've been some break-ins in the neighborhood. Better safe. She looked at the keys, then at me. Something flickered behind her eyes. Fear, maybe, or recognition. Okay, I handed her 1 set. Yours. The old ones won't work anymore. She took them without comment. That afternoon I met with a lawyer. Not for divorce papers, not yet. Just information. What constituted proof. What timelines mattered. What I could do to protect myself financially if things went south. The lawyer was calm, matter of fact. Document everything, she said, and don't confront until you're ready to walk away or stay. No in between. I added more entries to the log that night after Julia was asleep. Day 4. Marcus entered house using unauthorized key. Duration inside, 11 minutes. Accessed master bedroom. Handled personal items. Evidence captured on interior camera. Time-stamped. Backed up to external drive. No theft observed but clear unauthorized access. Julia unaware or pretending to be. I saved the file, encrypted it, emailed a copy to myself at a new anonymous account. Then I sat back and stared at the ceiling fan turning lazy circles. I wasn't angry, not the red blinding kind. This was colder, clearer, like finally seeing the shape of the wound instead of just feeling the pain. Julia had made choices, Marcus had made choices, and I had made the choice to look away for too long. But looking away was over. Tomorrow, I would install a voice-activated recorder in the kitchen. Legal in a one-party consent state. I'd keep going to work, keep paying the mortgage, keep eating dinner across from her like nothing had changed. Because nothing had changed, not really. The fracture had been there for months. I was only now mapping its depth. And when the time came, when the evidence was undeniable, when the words were ready, I would decide. Not out of rage, not out of hurt, out of clarity, whether this marriage was worth salvaging or whether it was time to let the broken thing finally break all the way. Either way, I wouldn't be the one left standing in the wreckage wondering what happened. Not anymore. 2 weeks of surveillance had given me enough evidence to fill a small notebook. Marcus Bell's visits to my house had become as regular as clockwork. Every Tuesday and Thursday when Julia claimed to be showing houses, and every Saturday morning when I was supposedly at the office catching up on weekend maintenance calls. Except I wasn't at the office anymore. I was parked 3 blocks away, coordinating with Elle via text message, building a case that was becoming more damning by the day. He's here, Elle texted at 9:15 a.m. on a Saturday that was supposed to be my busy morning at Rossner Tech. Brought coffee for 2, Starbucks cups. I sat in my Honda Civic, hidden behind a landscaping truck, and felt something cold settle in my stomach. Marcus bringing coffee suggested a level of familiarity that went way beyond professional handyman services. "Any work trucks? Tools?" I texted back. "Toolbox in hand, but he's also carrying what looks like pastries. This isn't a service call, Dan." My phone rang. It was my boss, Mr. Rossner, wondering where I was for our scheduled Saturday maintenance window. I fed him some story about food poisoning and promised to handle everything remotely, then hung up and contemplated the wreckage of my life. 3 more texts from Elle arrived in rapid succession. "They're in the kitchen, laughing about something. Now they're by the pool. She's in that red bikini. Dan, you need to see this. Coming over." I drove home and parked 2 blocks away, then walked through Elle's backyard to avoid being seen. She met me at her back door with a grim expression and her phone in her hand. "I took photos," she said without preamble. "You're not going to like them." The first photo showed Julia and Marcus sitting by our pool, coffee cups and pastry boxes on the table between them. Julia was indeed wearing her red bikini, the one she claimed was too revealing to wear when I was around. Marcus was shirtless, and they were sitting closer together than any homeowner and handyman had a right to be. The second photo was worse. It showed Marcus applying sunscreen to Julia's shoulders while she laughed at something he'd said. The third photo made my hands shake. Julia and Marcus in what was unmistakably an embrace, her arms around his neck, his hands on her waist. "When was this taken?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. 10 minutes ago." I stared at the images on Elle's phone, watching my marriage die in high-definition color. 22 years together, 15 years married, and this was how it ended, with my wife entertaining another man in our backyard while I sat in a neighbor's kitchen looking at photographic evidence of my own humiliation. "I'm sorry, Dan," Elle said softly. "I know this isn't what you wanted to find. Actually, it's exactly what I needed to find." I handed her phone back and stood up, surprised by how calm I felt. "Now I know what I'm dealing with." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to fix this." "Dan, you can't fix an affair by—" "I don't mean fix the marriage, Ella. I mean fix the situation. Julia and Marcus think they're being clever, sneaking around behind my back. They think I'm too stupid and too absorbed in my work to notice what's happening in my own house." I walked to Elle's window and looked across at my backyard, where my wife and her lover were now lounging by the pool, like they didn't have a care in the world. "They're right that I can't fix a leaky faucet," I continued, "but I can fix a network that's been compromised. I can identify the source of the problem, isolate it, and eliminate it, and that's exactly what I'm going to do." Elle raised an eyebrow. "That sounds ominous." "It should." I spent the rest of the weekend planning, not just the divorce, that would come later, and with Elle's photographic evidence, it would be swift and decisive. No, I was planning something more immediate and infinitely more satisfying. Marcus Bell had built his reputation on being the reliable handyman who could fix anything. But every system has vulnerabilities, and every man has weaknesses. I just needed to find his. Monday morning, I called in sick to work and began my research in earnest. If Marcus was running around with married women, there had to be others. Men like him didn't suddenly develop a taste for adultery. It was a pattern, a business model disguised as customer service. I started with his social media accounts, cross-referencing the women who commented on his posts with public records, marriage licenses, and property ownership databases. It was tedious work, but I had the skills and the motivation to be thorough. By noon, I had identified at least 6 other married women in the area who seemed to have unusually close relationships with Marcus Bell. Women who commented on his photos with heart-eye emojis, who tagged him in posts about amazing service, who appeared in his Instagram stories at various social events around town. But it was the 7th name that made me sit back in my chair and smile for the first time in weeks. Jennifer Walsh, married to Detective Mike Walsh of the Clearwater Police Department. Jennifer, who had posted a glowing review of Marcus's work on her Facebook page just 3 days ago. Jennifer, whose husband was known around town for his short temper and his strong opinions about men who disrespected other men's wives. I picked up my phone and dialed the non-emergency number for the Clearwater PD. "Detective Walsh, please. Tell him it's regarding his wife's recent home improvement project." 20 minutes later, I was sitting across from Detective Mike Walsh in a coffee shop downtown, watching his face turn progressively redder as he scrolled through the photos I'd printed out. Not the ones of Julia and Marcus, but the ones I'd found on social media showing Marcus and Jennifer at various local events. "Where did you get these?" Walsh asked, his voice tight with controlled anger. "I'm an IT specialist. I know how to research people online. The question is, Detective, what are you going to do about it?" Walsh studied the photos again, his jaw clenched. "What exactly are you suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm stating facts. Marcus Bell has a pattern of getting very close to his female clients, married female clients, and based on what I've observed, he's not just fixing their plumbing." I pulled out my phone and showed Walsh the photos Elle had taken of Julia and Marcus. "This is my wife. This was taken in my backyard last Saturday morning." Walsh looked at the photos, then back at me. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to help me send a message to Mr. Bell that his customer service model is about to become very expensive. I can't arrest a man for adultery. I'm not asking you to arrest him. I'm asking you to have a conversation with him, man to man, husband to husband. Let him know that his reputation in this community is about to change." Walsh was quiet for a long moment, staring at the photos of his wife and Marcus. When he finally looked up, his eyes were cold as winter. "What did you have in mind?" The plan was simple, elegant, and completely legal. Detective Walsh would arrange for Marcus to be pulled over for a routine traffic stop. Nothing dramatic, just a standard license and registration check. During that stop, Walsh would have a friendly conversation with Marcus about the importance of maintaining professional boundaries with clients. Meanwhile, I would be implementing phase 2 of my revenge plan, exposing Marcus's business practices to his entire client base. I had spent years building and maintaining databases, and I knew how to use that knowledge for maximum impact. Marcus's customer list wasn't hard to reconstruct. Between his social media accounts, online reviews, and public business filings, I had names, addresses, and phone numbers for most of his regular clients. What Marcus didn't know was that many of those clients' husbands were about to receive anonymous emails containing photographic evidence of their handyman's extracurricular activities. Wednesday evening, I sat in my home office, finger hovering over the send button for an email that would go out to 43 different addresses. The subject line read, "Important information about Bell's home repair services." Julia was in the living room, watching television and texting someone, probably Marcus, based on the way she kept smiling at her phone. She had no idea that her secret was about to become very public knowledge. I clicked send. Within an hour, my phone started ringing. The first call was from Detective Walsh. "It's done," he said simply. "Mr. Bell and I had a very productive conversation about professional ethics. I don't think he'll be expanding his customer service offerings anytime soon." The second call was from a number I didn't recognize. "Is this Dan Parker?" The voice was male, angry, and unfamiliar. "Yes." "This is Tom Rodriguez. You sent me some photos of my wife and Marcus Bell. I want to know where you got them and what you want." "I got them from public social media accounts, Mr. Rodriguez, and I don't want anything. I just thought you should know what kind of services you were paying for." The third call came before I could hang up from the second, then the fourth, then the fifth. By Thursday morning, Marcus Bell's phone was apparently ringing nonstop. I knew this because Julia kept trying to reach him and getting voicemail, which made her increasingly agitated as the day wore on. "Have you heard from Marcus?" she asked me over breakfast, trying to sound casual. Why would I hear from Marcus? He was supposed to come by today to look at the air conditioning unit, but he's not answering his phone. Maybe he's busy, with other customers. Julia's phone buzzed with a text message. She read it quickly, and I watched her face go pale. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Fine," she said, but her voice was shaky. "Just work stuff." I had a pretty good idea what that text message said. By my count, Marcus Bell was about to lose at least 30 regular customers, and possibly his marriage, depending on how Mrs. Bell felt about her husband's customer service philosophy. That afternoon, Elle texted me, "Marcus just pulled into your driveway. Looks upset." I was ready for him. Marcus Bell knocked on my front door with the kind of aggressive urgency that suggested he was past the point of pretending this was a social call. When I opened the door, his usual confident smile was nowhere to be seen. "We need to talk," he said. "About what?" "You know damn well about what." I stepped outside and closed the door behind me, not wanting Julia to overhear whatever was about to happen. "I'm not sure I follow," I said calmly. Marcus stepped closer, trying to use his size to intimidate me. "You sent those emails. You've been watching me, taking pictures, calling people. What the hell is wrong with you?" "What's wrong with me?" I laughed, and it felt good. "Marcus, I'm not the one who's been screwing other men's wives. I'm just the one who documented it. You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about. I know about Jennifer Walsh, about Lisa Martinez, about at least 6 other married women whose husbands are now asking very uncomfortable questions about their home repair bills." Marcus's face flushed red. "You're crazy." "No, I'm thorough. It's an occupational hazard of working in IT. We notice patterns, inconsistencies, security breaches. And Marcus, you've been a massive security breach." I pulled out my phone and showed him one of Elle's photos, the one of him embracing Julia by our pool. "This is my wife," I said quietly. "In my backyard. Wearing a bikini I bought her for our anniversary. And that's you with your hands all over her." Marcus stared at the photo, and I watched him realize that his carefully constructed world was collapsing. "What do you want?" he asked finally. "I want you to stay away from my wife. I want you to stay away from my house. And I want you to find a new line of work, because your reputation as Clearwater's favorite handyman is officially over." "You can't prove anything?" "I don't have to prove anything. I just have to share what I've already documented. And Marcus, I've documented everything." The next morning, sunlight sliced through the blinds like accusations I no longer needed to dodge. I woke before Julia, slipped downstairs, and brewed coffee the way she used to like it. Strong, black, no sugar. The machine gurgled while I stared at the empty driveway where Marcus's truck had idled yesterday. No sign of him. Good. Julia came down in her robe, hair mussed, eyes wary. She accepted the mug without comment, cradling it like a shield. "I called the company this morning," I said casually, stirring my own coffee. "They're sending someone else to fix the unit. New technician. Should be here by noon." Her shoulders tensed. "You didn't have to do that." "I know, but I'm tired of waiting for favors." She sipped, gaze fixed on the table. "What happened yesterday? With Marcus? You didn't tell me." "Didn't need to. You already knew." Silence stretched, thick as summer humidity. Finally she spoke, voice small. It wasn't what you think. Not really." "Then enlighten me." She set the mug down hard enough to slosh coffee over the rim. "It started stupid. He came to service the system last spring. I was home alone, stressed from work, feeling invisible. He listened, complimented the house, the garden, me. It felt nice. One thing led to another. Texts, coffee, then more. I waited. No excuses about how lonely she'd been, how I'd been distant. She didn't offer them. Maybe she knew they'd sound hollow now. "How long?" 4 months, off and on." I nodded, letting the number settle between us like dust. 4 months of lies layered over every ordinary day, dinners, bills, weekend plans. I thought of the nights she'd come home late from errands, the way she'd showered twice sometimes, the phone always face down. "And you kept letting him come back," I said. Not a question. "He fixed things. The AC, the sink once. It was convenient." "Convenient," I echoed. The word tasted like rust. She looked up then, eyes wet but steady. "I'm not asking forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it, but I ended it. Yesterday, after you talked to him, I blocked his number, told him never to contact me again." I believed her. Not because she sounded sincere, though she did, but because the relief in her posture was unmistakable. The secret had been heavier than either of us realized. "I'm not staying," I said quietly. Her face crumpled for a second before she caught it. I figured. I need space, real space, not just separate bedrooms or polite silences. I'm moving into the guest house for now. We'll figure out the rest later. Counseling maybe if you want it. Or lawyers. Your choice. She nodded slowly. Okay. I expected tears, anger, begging. Instead, she just sat there looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. The woman who used to laugh at my terrible puns, who planned our vacations with color-coded spreadsheets, who once drove 3 hours to surprise me at a work conference. That woman had made choices. So had I. Choices to ignore the signs, to stay comfortable instead of honest. The new technician arrived at 11:45. Young guy, early 20s, nervous energy, toolbox clanking. He introduced himself as Tyler, shook my hand firmly, and got to work without small talk. Julia hovered in the kitchen doorway, watching him dismantle the unit, then disappeared upstairs. I helped Tyler carry the old compressor to his van. "Hot one today," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. "Yeah, been broken for weeks." He glanced at the house. "Wife mentioned on the phone it was urgent. Sorry for the delay. Scheduling got messed up." "No problem. Just glad it's getting fixed." He worked efficiently, professionally. No lingering glances, no compliments on the landscaping. When he finished, he handed me an invoice, explained the warranty, and left. The house hummed again, cool air whispering through the vents like a reset button. That afternoon, I packed a suitcase. Not everything, just clothes, laptop, a few books, my running shoes. Julia sat on the couch, knees drawn up, watching me move back and forth. "I'm not running away," I told her. "I just need to breathe somewhere that doesn't smell like what we lost." She swallowed. "Will you come back?" "I don't know yet." I carried the bag to the guest house out back, a small converted studio we'd built for visiting family that never came. It had its own entrance, kitchenette, view of the yard. I set my things down and stood in the doorway, looking at our main house. Lights were on in the kitchen. Julia moved behind the window, probably cleaning up the coffee spill from earlier. That night I lay on the unfamiliar bed, listening to crickets instead of her breathing. The peace I'd felt yesterday was still there, but now it had edges, sharp ones. I wasn't numb. I was awake. The days blurred into a routine that felt both strange and necessary. I went to work, came home to the guest house, cooked simple meals. Julia and I spoke when we crossed paths. Brief, careful exchanges about bills, groceries, the dog's vet appointment. We didn't fight. We didn't touch. We existed in parallel. 2 weeks later, she knocked on my door after dark. I opened it, surprised to see her holding a bottle of red wine we'd bought on our honeymoon in Tuscany. "Not to drink together," she said quickly. "Just, I found this in the cellar. Thought you might want it." I took the bottle. Our fingers brushed. Neither of us pulled away fast enough. "Thanks." She lingered. "I started seeing someone. A therapist. Alone. For now." "Good." I told her everything. No filters. I nodded. I'm thinking about it too. She gave a small, sad smile. Maybe one day we could go together? Maybe. She turned to leave, then paused. The AC's working great, by the way. House feels different. Yeah, I said. Cooler. She walked back across the yard. I closed the door, set the wine on the counter, and poured a single glass. I drank it slowly, tasting the years in it. Good ones, hard ones, the ones we'd wasted. I didn't know if we'd rebuild. Some things break clean, others shatter into pieces too small to find. But for the first time in months, I wasn't pretending everything was fine. I was facing the damage head on. And that, I realized, was the only way anything ever got fixed. My way. The 4th of July block party was Sandra Mitchell's idea. Sandra lived at the end of our street and had been organizing neighborhood events since before most of us moved in. This year's party was going to be the biggest yet, a full day of food, games, and fireworks in the community park at the center of our subdivision. Julia had been unusually enthusiastic about attending, which should have been my first warning sign. My wife wasn't typically the social butterfly type, especially not lately. But she'd volunteered to help with decorations and had even bought a new red, white, and blue sundress for the occasion. It'll be good for us to get out and socialize, she said, while getting ready that morning. We've been so isolated lately. I agreed that it would be good to socialize. In fact, I was counting on it. The community park was already bustling with activity when we arrived at noon. Someone had strung patriotic bunting between the palm trees, and folding tables groaned under the weight of covered dishes and coolers full of beer. Kids ran around with sparklers, and the smell of barbecue smoke filled the humid air. Dan, Julia! Sandra Mitchell waved us over to the registration table, where she was checking names off a list with the efficiency of a military quartermaster. So glad you could make it. Julia, the decoration committee did an amazing job. Thanks, Sandra. Where do you need us? Actually, I was hoping Dan could help with the audio-visual setup. We're doing a little slideshow presentation later, neighborhood highlights from the past year. Tommy Henderson was supposed to handle it, but his back went out this morning. I glanced at the folding table where a laptop and projector were waiting to be connected. I think I can manage that. Perfect. The slideshow is already loaded on the computer. Just need someone who knows what they're doing to get it running. Julia squeezed my arm. Look at that, honey. Something you can actually fix. Her tone was playful, but there was an edge to it that hadn't been there before Marcus Bell entered our lives. I smiled and kissed her cheek, tasting the bitter irony of the moment. I'll do my best, I said. While Julia went to mingle with the other wives, I set up the projection system with the kind of methodical precision that had made me good at my job. But I wasn't just connecting cables and adjusting screen angles. I was also making some modifications to Sandra's innocent neighborhood slideshow. The beauty of being the IT guy is that people assume you're just doing technical stuff when you're typing on a computer. They don't look too closely at what you're actually doing, especially when you project an air of competent boredom. It took me 20 minutes to integrate my own photos into Sandra's slideshow, complete with captions and smooth transitions. The timing had to be perfect. Too early in the presentation, and people might not be paying attention. Too late, and the impact would be lost. I decided to insert my special content right after the segment on neighborhood improvements. It seemed thematically appropriate. By 2 o'clock, the park was packed. It seemed like every resident of our subdivision had turned out, along with friends and relatives visiting for the holiday. I spotted Detective Walsh near the beer table, talking to a group of other men who looked like they might be cops. Elle was helping serve food, but she caught my eye and nodded slightly. She knew what was coming. What I didn't expect was to see Marcus Bell's navy blue F-150 pull into the parking area. He climbed out of his truck, looking like a man who'd spent the week in hell, which, based on the feedback I'd been getting from my email campaign, was probably accurate. His usual confident swagger was gone, replaced by the hunched shoulders of someone expecting trouble. But he wasn't alone. Julia appeared at his side almost immediately, and even from across the park I could see the tension in their body language. They were having an intense conversation, heads close together, her hand on his arm. "Interesting development," Ella said, appearing at my elbow with a plate of potato salad. "Very interesting. You ready for this?" I looked around the park at my neighbors, people I'd lived near for years but barely knew, people who were about to get a very intimate look at my private life. As ready as I'll ever be. Sandra Mitchell climbed onto the small stage that had been set up for the evening's band and tapped the microphone for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please. We're going to start our annual neighborhood slideshow in just a few minutes. Dan Parker has graciously agreed to handle our technical needs, so let's give him a round of applause." Scattered clapping filled the air as I made my way to the laptop. Julia was still deep in conversation with Marcus near the parking area, but they were starting to attract attention from other partygoers. "Testing, testing," I said into the microphone. My voice echoed across the park, and conversations gradually died down as people turned toward the stage. The slideshow began innocuously enough: photos of neighborhood kids at Halloween, the Christmas light competition, the spring cleanup day. People laughed and pointed at themselves and their friends, the relaxed atmosphere of a community celebrating itself. I let Sandra's original content run for about 10 minutes, building anticipation and ensuring I had everyone's attention. Julia and Marcus had moved closer to the crowd, though they were still standing apart from the main group. Then came the slide I'd been waiting for. Neighborhood improvements, making our community better. The first few photos showed legitimate home improvements, new roofs, landscaping projects, fresh paint jobs. People applauded for their neighbors' efforts, and I heard someone call out, "Looking good, Peterson." Then my content began. The first photo showed Marcus Bell's truck in my driveway, time-stamped and dated. The caption read, "Bell's Home Repair, serving the neighborhood." A few people applauded, not yet understanding what they were seeing. The second photo showed Marcus and Julia by my pool, sitting closer together than any homeowner and contractor should be. The timestamp showed it was taken on a Saturday morning when I was supposedly at work. The applause died down, replaced by confused murmuring. The third photo was the embrace Elle had captured, with Marcus's hands on Julia's waist and her arms around his neck. The caption read, "Full-service home repair." Now the murmuring turned to gasps and uncomfortable laughter. I could see people turning to look at Julia, who had gone white as a sheet. But I wasn't done. The fourth photo showed Marcus applying sunscreen to Julia's shoulders. The fifth showed them sharing what was obviously an intimate conversation over coffee and pastries. The sixth showed Julia in her red bikini, the one she claimed was too revealing to wear around her own husband. "Jesus Christ," someone said loudly. The seventh photo was a group shot I'd found on Marcus's Instagram account, showing him at a neighborhood barbecue with his arm around Jennifer Walsh. The eighth showed him with Lisa Martinez at what appeared to be a pool party. The ninth showed him with 3 other women I'd identified as his clients. The final photo was a composite I'd created, showing Marcus with all of his married female clients arranged in a grid pattern, with the caption, "Bell's Home Repair, we service more than your house." The silence that followed was deafening. Then Detective Walsh stepped forward, his face red with anger, and pointed directly at Marcus. "You son of a bitch," he said, his voice carrying across the silent park. That broke the dam. Suddenly everyone was talking at once, voices raised in anger, confusion, and excitement. I could see several men pushing through the crowd toward Marcus, their faces promising violence. Marcus, to his credit, didn't try to run. He stood his ground as Tom Rodriguez reached him first, grabbing him by the shirt and shoving him backward. "You were in my house," Rodriguez shouted. "You were with my wife." "It's not what you think," Marcus started to say, but he was cut off by Detective Walsh arriving and pulling Rodriguez away. "Let me handle this," Walsh said, his voice deadly calm. "Marcus Bell, You and I need to have another conversation." Julia was backing away from the confrontation, her face a mask of horror and humiliation. She caught my eye across the crowd, and I saw the exact moment she realized that I was responsible for this public destruction of her secret life. She started pushing through the crowd toward me, her face twisted with rage. "You bastard!" she screamed, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You sick, pathetic bastard!" The crowd parted to let her through, everyone eager to see how this drama would play out. Julia reached the stage area where I was still standing behind the laptop, and for a moment I thought she might actually try to physically attack me. Instead, she grabbed the microphone. "You want to know the truth?" she said, her voice amplified across the silent park. "You want to know why I was with Marcus? Because my husband is a pathetic excuse for a man who can't fix anything, can't satisfy anyone, and can't even be bothered to pay attention to his own wife." The crowd was riveted. This was better than any fireworks show they could have hoped for. "You're right," I said, taking the microphone back. "I can't fix a leaky faucet. I can't replace a ceiling fan. I can't even hang a picture straight." Julia smiled triumphantly, thinking she'd scored a victory. "But," I continued, "I can fix a network security breach. I can identify malicious software and eliminate it from the system. And Julia, you and Marcus were definitely malicious software." I gestured toward the projection screen, where the slideshow was still running on a loop, cycling through the evidence of their affair. "I can't fix a garbage disposal," I said, "but I can definitely take out the trash." The crowd erupted in laughter and applause, and I saw Julia's face crumble as she realized that public opinion had turned decisively against her. Marcus, meanwhile, was surrounded by angry husbands and had Detective Walsh's hand on his shoulder, in a grip that looked anything but friendly. "I think it's time for you to leave," Walsh said to Marcus, his voice carrying clearly across the park. "And I think it's time for you to find a new line of work, preferably in a different state." Marcus nodded quickly, clearly eager to escape before the situation turned violent. He pushed through the crowd toward his truck, followed by a chorus of catcalls and insults from the men whose wives he'd been servicing. Julia stood on the stage, isolated and humiliated, as our neighbors stared at her with a mixture of pity and disgust. She looked around desperately as if searching for an ally in the crowd, but found none. "This isn't over," she said to me, her voice shaking with rage. "Yes, it is," I replied calmly. "It's been over for weeks. You just didn't know it yet." Julia stormed off toward our house, leaving me alone on the stage with a crowd of neighbors who were buzzing with excitement over the most dramatic 4th of July party in the subdivision's history. Elle appeared at my side, grinning broadly. "Well," she said, "I don't think anyone's going to forget this block party anytime soon." Sandra Mitchell, ever the organizer, stepped up to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, "I think we can all agree that Dan Parker has given us quite a show today. Now, who's ready for some fireworks?" The crowd cheered and began to disperse, breaking into small groups to discuss what they'd just witnessed. I could hear fragments of conversation as people walked past. "Can you believe she was doing that in her own backyard? I always thought there was something off about that Marcus guy. Good for Dan. About time someone stood up to that cheating bastard." As the sun set over the Gulf Coast and the first fireworks began to explode in the darkening sky, I stood in the community park surrounded by neighbors who were seeing me in a completely different light. For the first time in months, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. Detective Walsh approached me as the crowd thinned out. "Hell of a presentation," he said. "Thanks for your help with Marcus." "My pleasure. He won't be bothering anyone in this neighborhood again." Walsh paused, watching the fireworks paint the sky in brilliant colors. "What are you going to do now?" he asked. I looked toward my house, where lights were on, but Julia's car was no longer in the driveway. She'd apparently decided to spend the night somewhere else, which was probably wise. "Now I'm going to fix what's actually broken," I said, "starting with my marriage, or what's left of it. Good luck with that." Thanks, but I don't think I'll need luck. I've got something better. What's that? I smiled as another firework exploded overhead, filling the sky with golden light. I've got the truth. And sometimes that's the only tool you need. The fireworks continued for another hour, but I barely noticed them. I was too busy planning my next moves, the divorce papers that would need to be filed, the house that would need to be sold, the new life that would need to be built from the wreckage of the old one. For the first time in years, I was looking forward to fixing something. As the last firework faded from the sky and the crowd began to head home, Elle walked over to where I was packing up the projection equipment. "So," she said, "what's next for the neighborhood's most notorious IT specialist?" "Next, I start over. Clean slate, fresh start, no more broken marriages to worry about." "Any regrets?" I thought about that as I coiled up the last of the cables. Did I regret destroying my wife's affair in such a public way? Did I regret humiliating Marcus Bell in front of half the neighborhood? Did I regret turning our private pain into public entertainment? "No," I said finally. "No regrets. They made their choices, and I made mine. The only difference is that my choices were smarter." Elle laughed. "Remind me never to get on your bad side. Don't cheat on your husband with the handyman and you'll be fine." As we walked back toward our houses, I could see that Julia had returned. Her car was in the driveway, and lights were on throughout the house. There would be conversations to have, papers to sign, lawyers to hire, the practical business of ending a marriage, but all of that could wait until tomorrow. Tonight, I was going to sit on my back porch, drink a beer, and enjoy the satisfaction of a job well done. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. Sometimes it's simply letting everyone see the truth. And sometimes that's all the fixing a situation needs.